When you think of the word sexuality, what does that mean to you? We might guess it has something to do with sex, right? And that's easy enough. In this video, I'll be explaining what sexuality is by using a model called the Circles of Sexuality. And towards the end, I'll be sharing an activity that you could use to explore your own sexuality a little bit more, or if you're a fellow educator watching this and you would like to use it in the classroom, some potential questions you could ask students, depending on the age of students that you teach. Welcome to YourSexEd with Lisha. That's me. I have my Master's of Education, specialized in human sexuality. I work full-time as a health educator and part-time consultant. The Circles of Sexuality model was created in the 80s by a man named Dennis Daly. This model is a really great starting point to get a more well-rounded understanding of what sexuality is by essentially taking 5 different but overlapping circles that each make up their own area of life and experiences that we all go through that will eventually all tie together to culminate in our own unique experiences of our sexuality. Let's dive into the circles, shall we? The first one up is sensuality. Sensuality is defined as how aware and how much we enjoy our bodies and the bodies of others. This also includes how much we accept our bodies and accept the bodies of others. So think of the root word of sensuality. So those are senses, the things that we can see, smell, taste, hear. Our skin's the biggest organ, so the things that we can touch. So to begin with, the sensuality circle includes things like skin hunger. Now, that might be a new term for most of you. You might be sitting there like,
what's skin hunger?
And does it have anything to do with cannibalism? No, it does not. Skin hunger is essentially the need for caring physical touch. Then there's oral and visual stimuli. That's essentially the things that we can see and the things that we can hear, and that also depends on our ability. The next part of the sensuality circle is the sexual response cycle, and that is the pattern of sexual arousal and orgasm as a result of either masturbation, aka sex with yourself, or sex with another person. Next one up is body image. This one can also go super deep, so I'd be excited to do a video at a later point. But essentially, body image is the feeling that we have and how we perceive our own body and like the thoughts that we have about our own bodies. And the last part of the sensuality circle is fantasies, which happen naturally from our brain creating imaginary or made-up scenarios that are usually sexual in nature, but could be about different experiences or behaviors that we either have or have not experienced. I would love to do another video just about fantasies as well because they're super interesting, and I feel like people hold a lot of shame and stigma oftentimes from fantasies. The second circle is intimacy, which is defined as the feelings of closeness with another person. So sensuality focuses on the senses, right? Physical closeness. Intimacy focuses on emotional closeness. And this includes things like sharing emotions, caring about another person's feelings. That both includes holding space for their joy and their pain. Then there's liking or loving someone. So that's taking that emotional closeness that you've built up and attaching those feelings to a particular person. And then there's emotional risk-taking that's part of the circle. This means that in order to have true intimacy, a person has to open up by sharing their personal thoughts and feelings. And although this can be super scary for some people, it's necessary in order for you to have open, close, emotional relationship with someone that you want intimacy with. The next part of intimacy is vulnerability. Having emotional intimacy with someone makes us vulnerable because the person whom we share that emotional vulnerability with now has the capacity to hurt us emotionally. But we know that while still self-disclosing and trusting that although they could use that to emotionally hurt us, that they wouldn't intentionally hurt us. The thing to remember is we can't have intimacy without emotional vulnerability, and we can't have intimacy without reciprocity. So this means that each person in the relationship has to be willing and able to be emotionally vulnerable in order to have emotional intimacy. So now, moving on to the third circle, is sexual identity. This includes someone's understanding of who they are, which is comprised of three main components. So that includes gender role, gender identity, and sexual orientation. So those are the three main interlocking components of sexual identity. A common saying that you might hear, especially in spaces of sex ed, is gender is between the ears. So what that means is that gender is how the heart and the mind regard the body. And also, there's a variety of labels that someone will choose to describe their gender identity, and sometimes people might even make up words, just like the rest of language is made up. They'll make up words to describe their gender identity, and they're all absolutely valid. The second interlocking component for sexual identity is sexual orientation. That would be the gender or genders that someone would be sexually attracted to, right? Their sexual orientation. And there are literal hundreds of labels that someone uses to describe their sexual orientation. And a lot of people might use a few different labels to communicate how they can be attracted to other people. So for example, yours truly, I tend to use three main labels for my sexual identity or sexual orientation. The three labels I personally often use is pansexual, demisexual, and noetisexual. So it's completely fine if all three of those words completely threw you and you have no idea what they mean. I promise to do a video later on down the line further describing what general understandings of those words are and how I understand those words and how they apply to me. The reason I bring them up right now in this video is because just to show you that people do use multiple labels to talk about how their attraction works, and they're all valid as well. And the third interlocking component for sexual identity is gender roles. So gender roles are the actions or behaviors for each gender. Some gender roles are created based on how someone's body looks or how they function. So for example, the archaic thought that like women are meant to stay at home taking care of children because their bodies birth the children. So that's taking somebody based on how their body looks and functions and applying a role to them. So based on gender. No matter what, the thing to remember about gender roles and gender in general is that they are socially constructed and culturally defined. What that all means is essentially gender roles are made up. And how someone understands gender roles depends on the time and history that they're in, the type of people that they are, and the culture that they are in. Next up is the fourth circle, that is sexual health and reproduction. So when I meet with students at work or I meet a random person who just asks what I do for a living, the stuff included in this circle of sexual health and reproduction are more often the things that people associate with my work is what I do as a sex educator. So this circle encompasses both someone's ability to physically reproduce and the related behaviors that influence someone's sexual relationships to be both enjoyable and healthy. So sexual health and reproduction circle include factual sexual information. That's your sex ed stuff. That's the type of stuff that you might learn in a typical sex ed or health class if you had one. Unfortunately, most people don't have sex ed, and if they do, it's not comprehensive or inclusive in any way.
Don't have sex, because you will get pregnant and die. Don't have sex in the missionary position. Don't have sex standing up. Just don't do it, promise?
The next item on the list is anatomy and physiology. So this is the body and how it functions. Think about puberty and how that impacts sexuality. Then there is sexually transmitted infections, or STIs for short. Next up is reproductive autonomy, and that's not to be confused with reproductive anatomy. So reproductive autonomy is pretty much someone's right to their body and reproductive access. So this is such things as birth control, contraception, or abortion. And the last one is sexual intercourse. So the obvious, right? Which is, of course, the actual multiple physical acts of sex that someone could have. The fifth and final circle is sexualization, which includes the usage of sexuality in any capacity in order to control, influence, or manipulate others. This may include things like sexual trauma. So that's the type of things like rape, sexual assault, childhood sexual assault. Then there is flirting, seduction, messages in the media, including social media, and withholding sex. So you'll find that sometimes with people withholding sex as a way to control or manipulate or get what they want from somebody. So those are the 5 circles of sexuality: sensuality, intimacy, sexual identity, sexual health and reproduction, and sexualization. Now, neither of these circles are more or less important than each other. They're all interconnected and overlapping in order to culminate into our experience as sexual beings, as well as creating the unique values that we all hold about sexuality. At the beginning of this video, I explained that the circles were a great starting point into understanding sexuality deeper, and I want to re-emphasize that point because as much info as this may or may not have felt like to receive, there are other aspects that absolutely influence the formation of our sexuality that the model does not include. So that includes the unique intersections of how we experience marginalization, oppression, privilege, and power. So for that reason, consider this video more of a 101. I will likely create videos later on down the road that takes a deeper dive into all of these topics. There really is a lot of information to know, but if I included that all here, this would be a much longer video. And if you're watching this in real time, it would be really helpful if you could like this video to let me know that this is the kind of content that you would like to see eventually. So that would really help me out. So now what? What do we do with this information and knowledge that we just talked about in order to understand ourselves more? And if you're a fellow educator watching this, how can you possibly use this information to make yourself a better educator? I must place a warning here, though, that reflecting on the circles of sexuality, particularly with the sexualization circle, but I mean with all of them, that this reflection could possibly activate some trauma. Some of that might be stuff you already aware of. It could be stuff you're not aware of. So knowing that, unpack all of this, of course, at your own pace. Go at your speed and also set up the necessary supports that you think you may need. So those supports could look like friends, family. If you regularly see a therapist, highly recommend a therapist as your number one. Really just any other supportive person in your life that you can identify. So what I want you to do is take each of these concepts, if you're journaling or meditating on them, and while journaling or thinking to yourself, ask yourself a few probing questions. Now, some of these probing questions might make you a little uncomfortable, and that's okay. It's key to remember that growth requires a moderate amount of discomfort. So, of course, in my very first video, in true YouTuber fashion, my camera died. So here I am on a completely different day, finishing up this video for you all. So for the reflection activity, ask yourselves these following questions for each item within each of the circles. By no means is this an exhaustive list. It's mostly just some starting questions that can get the juices flowing in case you're kind of like sitting there like, okay, how do I reflect on these questions or these circles? So think about what is the underlying message that you internalized and believed to be inherently true based on that experience with that specific topic. So an example for this could be with anatomy, where you taught just the anatomy structure and not necessarily how those body parts work, especially for pleasure. That's absolutely something to reflect on. The next one is, what's the first memory that comes to mind when you think of each aspect of these circles? So an example of this could be around gender. possibly. It could be when you were super young, wanting to play with a toy that possibly wasn't assigned to other people of your gender, and you reflect on maybe that was your first memory of gender and the policing of gender. That could very well not have happened to you, but you can use this as a point to think about, what is my first memory with insert topic here. And here is where I'm going to be asking you to dig even a little deeper, if you're able. If you could unlearn anything about that experience, what would it be? Why or why not? And conversely, if you could learn anything about that topic, what would that be? Why or why not? And given the sucky nature of general comprehensive sex education in this country, or lack thereof, you might have a longer category of the things you would like to learn than the things that you would like to unlearn. But whichever your answers come out is okay. There really is no wrong answer. And the last question I have for you, but by no means is like the end of your reflection of these things, is how have you evolved in that area of your life? And even pushing a little deeper, how would you like to evolve in that area of your life? So, if you do have the capacity to meditate on these, I highly suggest doing so, because it can illuminate a lot of things that you maybe hadn't considered before, or maybe things that you even thought you forgot about. And our answers to these questions not only gives us the opportunity to shed some light on learning more about ourselves, deepening our connection with ourselves more, but it also allows us the familiarity to deepen connections with others. In order to connect with others, you have to be familiar with yourself. And so getting deeper on these topics allows us to also deepen our relationships and have more informed and authentic relationships with other people in our lives. And if you are a sexuality educator watching this, I highly suggest and even think this should be a requirement to reflect on these topics, because knowing your personal positionality will help you check your biases even more when facilitating information to students about these topics. So you'll probably need a hot minute to let this concept sink in, all the new language that I just talked about, and even your own experiences, things like that. Take care of yourselves. Do what you gotta do. Informational resources that I use to create this video are actually linked in the box below, because as much as I would like to claim that I'm just genius and came up with all this stuff on my own, I unfortunately did not. And so all the information resources that I used are linked below. Off the top of your head though, which circle sticks out or surprises you the most to be included as part of sexuality? Answer that for yourselves in the comments below. Give some consensual love to that subscribe button, and I will see you in the next one. And if you're a fellow educator watching this, how can you possibly use this information to make yourself a better educator? Well, I'm about to explain it to you. What sexuality is by using pull down an eyelash, god damn it. My camera died. Actually, it died and I ran out of storage. So, yeah. So for the